And now we're going to check sound.
I hope you all came prepared with questions. And if not, I will just all be surprised. Okay, I'm plugged in.
Can you
Testing? 1, 2.
So we're live.
Okay, boss? Namaste. Namaste, welcome here. So, what are we going to talk about today? I know something we can talk about. It's on my mind, is stillness. But it's sort of a joke to talk about it. Stillness is very far out because it's a way to extinguish yourself and with that all your suffering. So how do you do that? The mind just keeps on doing its business, running here and there. Let's have a look. Have a look at your mind. Let's take a few minutes and see if you can find silence, but also be aware of what's there that's not silence. So what are you finding?
For me, there's two different kinds of stillness. There's the stillness when I go into my heart and completely shut off my head. And I can do that easily, but I'm finding that I still need to use my brain to function in this world. So it's almost like I have to take almost a warm blanket and put it over my thinking mind so it has air to breathe, but it doesn't have room to run around.
Yeah, good story. Okay, so you said there's two things. So you're talking about the stillness
There's
and then the mind.
Stillness. There's the stillness I get from my heart, which I know how to get to pretty easily, but it's the stillness in my head that's much more difficult, and so I'm really working on that.
Well, so the question is, though, what are you paying attention to? Isn't it?
Yes, I'm paying attention to clarity and stillness and trying to bring it trying to join the wisdom mind to the heart center,
Okay,
to my
let's
soul.
I know what you're talking about, but
Mhm.
let's stay with experience rather than these terms, right?
Mhm.
So when we're in our everyday normal state of mind, what happens? What's going on?
Kind of running rampant.
Well, the mind is just doing its thing, right?
Right.
It's, you wake up in the morning and it's already chattering. It's
Mhm.
And then we get little breaks in there, but we don't really notice them, usually, right? There are little breaks. Like suddenly you look at a flower or a painting, or you just take a breath, and there's a break in the action. You don't think. It's just like something different comes in. But we're generally not very aware of that. So then when we try to cultivate that, there appears to be the struggle between the thinking that's going on, that noise, this interest and that interest, you know, and a movement toward relaxing inside of us. And that can happen at the same time. You don't have to forcibly shut down the mind, because then you just have a war going on, and that's not very friendly. It's not relaxing, right? So just let the mind do its thing and shift your attention into a more quiet space. And we use, just as a matter of focus, we use the heart space, right? We focus in there, and with some practice, you can actually either see the image of a light or the sun or whatever image you would like to have there. Some people who have a religious affiliation may use that. It's all fine. Realizing that what you're really focusing on is beyond any kind of image or concept. It's the deepest place. And from that place also, there's an essence that can come forth. And we can't feel that essence until we get more quiet. So that's some of the work that we do. The other part of the work is to look at all the stuff that keeps us out of the heart, all of the neurotic thinking and feelings that are floating around, that we love to get into or not. So this stillness is then, it's like you just stop having a fight with the mind. You just let it be. And you relax into yourself. So let's try that for a moment. Just see if you can let the mind do its thing and just pay less attention to it. And see if you can relax into the heart. And you may also notice some shifts in your body, in your energies. So how did that go? Anyone else want to talk to me?
The breathing changes.
Breathing changes. Exactly how? Can you tell? Could you tell?
It's also afraid to find that space. Or that
It's
place.
afraid to find its place? I have a hard time hearing you over the air conditioning.
I'm not sure if it's afraid or there's something that happens when you're trying to find that space.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good observation. See, you can't go wrong by observing yourself. So look at that fear that's afraid to like settle down and relax, and let it teach you what it's all about. Because these forces are inside of us and they run us below the radar of our conscious mind, right? So this is great that you just found that. There's a fear of letting myself really relax into the heart. I think it's extremely common. And it comes from maybe old, mostly, maybe not in your case. This is, so I'm making a general comment, but that may not, it may or may not be true for you, right? So you still have to find your own reason why that is for you. But in most people, that fear of relaxing or the hesitation of relaxing is because we're always on alert because of old traumas or experiences that told us that we live in an unsafe world and we better watch out, and so we always have some level of tension, and then at night we just go into sleep, and there's very little of that in-between space where you can just be not alert, awake, and attentive to the environment, but deep and peaceful inside of you. So something that might help you is just a story you hear from some guy, and he may be right or not, right? Myself. And I go into that space, when I let myself relax into that space, I find this delicious ease. It's like there's somebody in there who's smiling all the time or laughing. But of course, when I'm in my worry mind, I'm totally tuned out of this, right? But it's always there. And so the invitation is to develop a curiosity, to say, what is this heart of mine? We know the mind pretty well because we're there a lot. But we haven't really studied it either because it usually runs us. But it's much more interesting to ask, what is the heart? What is going on here? Because when we point to ourselves in our conversation, you say I, you go like this, don't you? You don't go like this, I. But we spend most of the time here. But I is here, the true I is here. And it takes simply just relaxing, letting go, which is real hard for many of us. And yet, when you think about it, it's the easiest thing in the world. We live our lives like that, always tense, trying to figure out how to avert the next disaster, escape from the next danger. And it becomes really chronic. And we live in a world where most people function that way, and so that gets constantly reinforced. I mean, just turn on the news. And you get to start to think that we live in a world that is just dreadful. We better watch out. We better have big insurance policies. And of course, we know behind that won't make us safe either. So we create a world from the way we are inside of us. So let's do this again, and let's try to find that being that's just in there laughing, having a great time. doing nothing. Because this is a human being, not a human doing. This is the space of peace inside of us. Let's see if we can get a taste of that. And you can also sort of scan through your whole being, your body, your mind, emotions, and notice where there's still tension. Just bring your attention to that tension and see what happens. So, how's it going? We can do this quick in and out. Any observations?
It was very peaceful this time.
Sorry?
It was very peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Went in and stayed in.
Good. Yeah. So notice that you can do that, right?
Yes.
And we do it all the time. We do it when we go to sleep. It's just that we get unconscious in that space then, right? That place of ease is always there. And we can actually give ourselves permission to, when everything's safe, the doors are locked, we can give ourselves permission to go there. And gradually with practice, we can find out that we can actually live there. Because when you're in this clear and peaceful space and your external alertness is demanded, it can be there. And it's much more effective when you're resting, even while you're alertly attending to something external. You're resting in that space because it brings clarity into your actions and into your moment. On the other hand, if we're tied up in tension on the surface of our being, how good are we actually going to deal with the world? Right? Yes?
I've been in meditation trying to take the heart essence and kind of distribute it through the rest of my body and bring it up into my head
Mhm.
and, you know, the mind brain center up there, so it can give it light and soften it a little bit. So that's something I've been trying
You're
to
working
do.
with the lover, being the lover and the beloved,
Mhm.
right? So the lover is here,
Right.
or the source of it all,
Another.
and the beloved is the entirety of your being
Mhm.
and your world. Everything is the beloved. And you can exchange, you can allow yourself to know this space even a little bit, this love that is there, this peace that is there, and then you can give yourself permission to receive it in your body, receive it in your mind. This is always the kicker, this receiving, because we're generally better at giving because we stay in control that way. But receiving, you surrender. Surrender to that love in you. And it's absolutely safe. There's nothing here that can hurt you. Or can you give me some argument of what can hurt you here? No one can leave you. No one can lie to you. No one can betray you. No one can hurt you because you're too open, too sensitive. Those things you may have heard. No, you can allow that. You can allow yourself to be as open, as sensitive to that inner source as you can possibly be. No limits. You can let yourself dissolve in that love. And when that moment passes and the next moment comes and you're dealing with the world again, wonderful. Now you're deeply refreshed, you're present, you're dealing with the world in the best possible way from that inner source. And that inner source cannot go anywhere. It's always there because it's what you are. And this momentary appearance of body, mind, and world, it started when you were born, and it's going to end when you die. But what you are is not going to change. So this universe or this being what is real? We're so completely trained to see the universe as real and not even know the inner essence of who we are. But everything that begins in time and ends in time is a passing show. And it all plays in your awareness. That whole universe exists, appears and disappears in your awareness. And what happens to the awareness? What happens to that peace beyond understanding? What happens to that absolute silence? What happens to that complete, absolute love? Find out. We're just raising some possibilities here of shifting our attention into something that might just be different. And we've lived in this world unsatisfied, unfulfilled. And the point is that nothing we can focus on that begins and ends can give us the kind of fulfillment that is unshakable. Yeah, most people are content with the little happiness that starts and ends. But is that enough for you? So what about finding this laughing Buddha that sits in your heart? This profoundly loving presence of Christ. This Divine Mother in all her manifestations. And we have to use words and forms to point at something. When you find it, there is not a form there, except when you open your eyes, it's your form. Those terms, Buddha, Christ, Divine Mother, what else you want to use, they're metaphors for you. They're just pointers. Those beings are pointers to point us into the direction of the heart, into the direction of essence. So let's go in there again and see what happens. Okay, come back. So what did you find? Yes?
I just want to stay there.
You just want to stay there, but I called you back.
I was going to say the same thing. Why this in and out? Like,
It's practice.
but here's a question,
Mhm.
because I find for me that it takes time for the nervous system to come into a rhythm of decreasing the activity, and so the breath starts to slow down, and I'm more easily able to access anything.
Mhm.
But it takes time. So I also wanted to be there, and then it's interesting because I was, why we cannot stay there? So, but thank you. It allows me to practice letting go of the way I want it to be.
Yeah. Life is the way it is. It flows. Can we allow that and live in the grace of that? Because when we allow it and love it as it is, with all its suffering and all its beauty, then it becomes a river of grace, a stream of grace. But when we fight it, we're at war. And we can only be at war with ourselves, even though we may play that outside, but outside is in us too.
But is there any truth to what I'm saying?
That's your experience, yeah. It takes time to slow down, to come down. So what's good about going in like you just did and tasting and then being called back out? What's good about that? How does that serve you?
That I can perhaps notice the difference of being in that space, at least if it's just putting the one finger there, and also recognize how does it feel to be out of it.
Yeah.
So
And
is that
do
in and
you
out?
want to be in it?
Yes.
Well, that, training that desire to be in that inner space of peace, to live through the heart, it's like training a muscle. And we do it all the time. Like I said, you go through your life and you have moments where there's, you look at anything beautiful, for a moment at least your mind stops. And that happens many times, but we're not aware of it. So we go into that place, and then we're called out again because there are the bills to pay, or there is this email to answer, or there is this, the dishes to wash, or whatever, right? And we don't notice that, well, we may notice, we may resent having to be out there doing all that stuff. But who says you have to leave that place in order to do all that stuff? That's just what we do. We have become habituated to be out there in our outer life doing stuff and sort of resenting it or doing it like it's a chore.
I guess also the desire is as well as being in the space of the heart to silence the mind.
Yeah.
And
which
to,
goes, of course,
and to just
together.
notice those moments when you touch into stillness and wanting to be there more.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's a combination of both, a combination of stilling the mind and tapping into whatever feelings or sensations are around the heart. But to me, it's more that wishing of more and more increasing that gap in between the thoughts.
Yeah, right. So when that wishing appears, that's very precious, because it shows you what to do. And in the end, you will do what you want to do in every moment in your life. It's just that we're confused. And we think we have to attend to the outside world, losing ourselves in the outside world. Why not attend to the outside world while peaceful inside of you? Yeah, needs to be practiced because of the conditioned mind, emotions, behaviors, all that kind of stuff. But it's the most effortless thing. Yeah, we have this life. We don't live with our eyes closed in meditation all the time, right? That's just a practice for life. So when you touch that inner space of depth and peace, take it into your day as much as you can, and you'll lose it some, but let it whet your appetite. You will do what you want to do. And we've been habituated to want to protect ourselves. And all this mindset of not being safe or basically comes back to desire and fear. Desiring stuff. Hungry ghost life. Never fulfilled, because you're trying to get fulfillment in a part of life that is not equipped to fulfill you. Anything that starts and ends in time cannot fulfill you. So that's the hungry ghost thing. But then we have fear, and fear puts us into what kind of state of mind? Stress, of course. Yeah.
Anxious, anxiety.
Anxious, right. And these are variations of fear.
And anger.
Anger. So anger, it puts us into hell. In other words, right? So in the Tibetan teachings, there are two types of hell. There's a frozen hell and a hot hell. And I think that's very accurate, because the hot hell is the hell of anger and hate. And then you have the frozen hell, which is like hate, you shut it down. Right? It's just like not moving, frozen up. Right? Push it down, forget about it, throw away the key. So what do you want to do with that?
Practice more.
Huh?
Practice more.
Practice what?
More.
Well, yes and no. Practice can help. But it's in the recognizing of it. If something bothers you, do you really look at it? Or do you spend your days in escape and distraction? And hating it some more and pushing it some further down into unconsciousness?
But doesn't practice is a conducive of being able to look at it?
Yeah, practice is fantastic, and practice is what we're really talking about here, but I'm trying to point to the moment that comes through practice often, but sometimes may come just through grace, where you can see what's going on. You see yourself in the frozen hell of your fear, ultimately. And that can be through hatred, whatever it is, you shut down, right? So when you can see that, that's the moment of liberation. And it's just a matter of time for the pieces to go. And sometimes that can be quite instant. But as long as we don't see it, we don't see how we're prisoners of our own fears and desires, that we live in the world of our fears and desires, and that can never fulfill us. And we'll use spiritual life as an excuse as an escape. Oh, let me just be a light worker. And it's a beautiful impulse, you see. There's deep, profound truth in it because the light is who we are. But we can so easily, the ego, the shapeshifter that uses everything to stay alive, it uses that so well to get us distracted and tells, oh, we don't deal with that darkness. And if you don't deal with that darkness, you are weak. Because all your power is tied up in there. And it cannot be forced. I'm not saying to force anything. I'm simply speaking to you about what can happen when you go into silence. Because in silence, you are able to see yourself. And are you ready? Are you willing? Do you dare to take a look? Because what you see may not be pretty. When you see your old fears or your angers or your hatreds or your habits of complaining or whatever it may be. But you see, the point is when you see that stuff, you see what you are not. And the key to knowing what you are is to see what you are not. So you can see that you are not that. Does that make sense? Because only when you can see it and see that you are not that, can you be what you are. And there's nothing to do there. This is spontaneous. It's just what you are. Well, I'm not, here I am, and it's like this part of me is tied up in hell. Hell of my own making. I don't care if I was abused or neglected or treated terribly or had all kinds of horrible experiences. Still, what is that hell? That hell consists of my reactions to whatever happened to me. So I created it. And then I blame them. And that makes such a lovely personality.
What is that I created? Can you just go slowly? What is that I created?
Okay, so let's say you're abused in childhood, or or have an accident, or something like that. Some terrible happens to you that's like too big to handle. And please understand, there is never ever, when I speak like this, there's never ever any blame attached to that. It's like not, because this is where our mind goes, oh, I did it wrong, right? We always do it the best way we can. And we're here simply to expand that. So, something happens to you, let's say some terrible event happens, and this could be any time in the past, and it's this big, and your being is equipped to handle this much. And you handle this much gets digested over time. This is like what you say, time heals all wounds. Well, time heals this. But time can't touch that. This is like it's scrambled into your brain someplace, and then you're stuck in that place. And what is it? It's your reaction to whatever happened. And it's human, and it's understandable, and it is there because it has to be there. The question is, how do you get free? And so what we need to find, and this comes through practice, we need to nurture ourselves, and this is where the heart is so important. That place where there's already self-love, even though we may hate parts of ourselves. But that self-love is always there. We need to nurture ourselves. We need to love and be loved until we get to the place where we can have the courage to look at that piece that was repressed, that is like our hell. And when we have that courage to just say, yes, I want to see whatever the hell it is, and maybe I'll feel overwhelmed by it. So what? Everything comes and goes. So what? Have you ever felt overwhelmed by something? Yeah. Yeah?
Mhm.
Well, here you are. So did it overwhelm you? No, it's just a concept in the mind. You think like, oh, I couldn't deal with that again. And of course, if it happens, you will. We can deal with everything that happens. Just imagine this whole thing about past lives is true, right? And you have this infinite string of past lives behind you. You survived everything. You survived the death of your body, God knows how many times. You survived everything that you thought you couldn't handle. You handle it all. You already did. That's how powerful you are. Now let's handle it in such a way that you can actually become aware that you can handle it all and live in that space and have the security and assuredness and natural power of your being available to you. You have already handled it all. So can you handle, this is the question, can you handle looking at that which in the mind maybe you have the thought, I can't handle it. It's just a thought. You can question that thought if you have it. And some things, of course, are completely unknown to us. They're like repressed stuff that we don't even know is there, but we can see the effect because we're not free. We're not in this puddle of love and bliss all the time, which is our true nature. Not a puddle, but you know what I mean. You know, you're not that laughing Buddha all the time. Even when you are yelling at somebody or when you're crying with somebody, you know, because that laughing Buddha is always there. But we're not aware of it. So you've already survived it all, again and again and again and again. Like one of my teachers says, you're a serial murderer. Because you murdered yourself so many times. You always took a new body to do it again. And yeah, the opposite of doing that is the way of life that we're so accustomed to, which is to stay in distraction. To run after pleasures and run away from pain. And it's a pendulum. It's like you go to pleasure. You know, pleasure is the reward of the end of pain. And pain is the end of pleasure. So it always goes back and forth. Back and forth. And we can stay in that for uncounted lifetimes, complaining that life is unfair, which means absolutely nothing. It just means that we're blind. Or we can go to the still point where the pendulum swings from. And that still point is here. So we turn the pendulum around. Here is the still point. And the mind goes pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain. So we rest here and we nurture ourselves and we rejuvenate ourselves. We find bits and pieces of that peace, of that security, that unshakable nature that we have. And then that translates into bringing peace into that pleasure-pain deal in the mind. And the mind sees through it. It's like, oh, you know, I'm going to need that next cigarette. Not really. And you may put it down. Or not. But you start to see through it. You start to see through the distracted habits, the habits of distractedness, which is sort of the deepest enemy. Habits of distractedness is the way the ego keeps you running, keeps itself running, and you running in circles after it. So we deal with the surface stuff, surface hassles of life. And then we deal with that deep old stuff that we just rather not touch. But it's only when you touch it, when we can see it and touch it, that we can become free, and we can make a leap out of hell. A leap out of whatever it is that keeps us suffering. And we can hopefully agree on one point, that is that we don't need that source of suffering. But unless we see the source of suffering, we're tied to it, and we're going to repeat it. And we're going to, just automatically stay in that space. We won't know any better. Does anyone care to make that real for you by talking to me now as we're talking about this? Talk about what it is that you see within yourself that has these characteristics. And you may or may not see that right now. But if you can speak about it, it makes it so much more tangibly real. And trust me, whatever you see, whatever you got, everybody else got it too, in their particular way. Different manifestations, same stuff. In other words, we all suffer from fear, we all suffer from greed, we all suffer from confusion, we all suffer from desires, etc. Well, any takers? Any takers online? You have the benefit you can say something anonymously.
How do you make the distinction between the thoughts that you can just kind of let go and then the thoughts that you should question?
How do you make the distinction between the thoughts you should let go and the thoughts you need to question? It's simply, you see their staying power. If something is just there, or it keeps coming back, it's really good to do some work with it. There's so many thoughts you can't possibly question or investigate them all, and that's not the point. We just need to find the ones that, where the stress really is, where we have a charge. And you have a real charge on something, that belongs on paper. Unless you want to keep it. And that's not tongue-in-cheek, because we do that all the time. We have certain stressful thoughts, and we may even keep ourselves unawares that they're stressful because we get something from them. And then there's another category, and these to me were always the most precious thoughts to find, to investigate. The first time I encountered that, I was in a school with Katie. It was in 2000, I think, or 2001. And she had the whole group investigate a thought. And she said, okay, so we're going to do this exercise, and I'll have you look at the thought it's possible for people to hurt people. I'm going like, what? Why should we look at that? That's simply the way the world is. I was, I'm like born after the Holocaust. I know people can hurt people, right? That was so embedded in my belief system. I would have never dawned on me that I could actually question that type of a belief, that way of looking and experiencing the world, I should say, because that's what beliefs like that are. And so we did it, and I thought she had lost it, right? Because I know the way the world is. And 20 minutes later, I got up from doing this like intense exercise with this one thought, and my whole world had shifted. I had seen something I had never seen before. The possibility of being free, of believing in a world where constantly people were hurting people. I don't want to go any further because I want you to do that questioning. You see, I can give you intellectually now what I learned on the gut level, but I can only give you this up here, and up here it's not going to hold any water. It's not going to be really real. It'll be an interesting insight Ramgiri had. So what? What I'm saying is, think of all these core beliefs that you hold, and if there's anything stressful about them, you can question them. And then it goes further. Then we go into these really nice thoughts. What did we just have? Did we just have one? What was that with you?
It's many, I forgot.
I have a good example. When I came to be with my parents when they had just moved into the retirement home, and they both lived in one room and had to give up their beautiful house in the suburbs with a garden and all that. And I came to visit, and they were deeply depressed. And I walked out of there with this wonderful thought, my parents shouldn't have to suffer. Isn't that a good thought? A good son should have that thought, right? It only had one flaw. It had absolutely nothing to do with reality. And so I knew this was a stressful thought, and I better put it through inquiry. And some of you know the story. I did, and I cleared out that thought, and I realized that my parents shouldn't have to suffer. Or I could say, I don't want my parents to suffer. Let's make it even more personal. That wasn't what I did at the time, but it's the same thing. I don't want my parents to suffer. What's the turnaround to that? And you have to go through the whole thing to make it real for you. That one of the turnarounds is, I do want my parents to suffer. So how could that be true? We're not talking crazy language here. So it's not true that I want my parents to suffer because I'm just mean. Right? So that's not the meaning of it, but there's a truth to that. And the truth is that if it's their moment of suffering, I can be okay with that. I can be with them there. And the other turnaround is, I don't want myself to suffer. So when they're suffering, why do I have to make myself suffer? It's enough that somebody suffers. One, in this case, two people suffer, right? How is it served if I join them in their suffering? Because I imagine how bad it must feel for them. So anyway, after 2 hours of working with this, I was clear. I went back the next morning, and those two old people, they were both in the 90s at that time. I walked in, and I was just happy to see them. I had freed myself of that depression that I had taken on, not taken on, it's not correct, that I had given myself after being with them the previous day. And I walked in just happy to see them. And those two old people were just surprised by how happy they were to see me. And they rose up out of that depression and never fell into it again. And it was a real blessing that we shared. That was wonderful. And came from the fact that I didn't allow myself to stay in that place, oh, my poor parents don't have to suffer. Which we call compassion, but it isn't. Compassion is to do something for them. And you can't do something for somebody else when you can't even deal with your own suffering. So the greatest way to serve others is for you to end your suffering. Imagine if just a few more people did that on this planet. Suffering-free zones. And I can tell you the first person that I met who was like this was my guru. And just stepping into his presence, I was forever changed. Nothing had to be said, nothing had to be done. It was just his presence. The power of this heart that he had. And that heart is the same heart. We all have the same heart. It's just a question of how much have we practiced with it? How familiar are we with it? So by going in and out like we did today, it's like it whets your appetite. It's like, oh, maybe I want to be in there more. And so go in there, feel it, just relax and just get called out again. Isn't that like life? Right? Even when you do something and you love your work or something, and then something else comes and distracts you. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, only we're going more intimate now into a deeper place. And then we become motivated to find all the ways that we keep ourselves out of our heart. And how do we do that? 3 ways, which all boil down to one way, but it manifests as distractedness of mind, specific stressful thoughts and beliefs, and negative emotions. Can we handle them? That's what we do in HeartSourcing Yoga with the skills. And what's left when we do that is the natural way of life in the heart, which does not have to be done. It's just we have to find it because we get lost out there. Lost in the world of senses and mind. So, let's do it again. And just maybe it's helpful, you use whatever you use, and you all may have your different ways to get in touch with the heart, but just imagine maybe that laughing Buddha, who's not just laughing because somebody told him a dirty joke. He's laughing because he's in a place that cannot be disturbed. A place of absolute peace and happiness and profound love that cannot be disturbed. And that Buddha is inside of your heart. You are that. Okay, come back. I'll disturb you again. So if you have a desire to stay in that space, to go more deeply, great. You got plenty of time.
That image of the laughing Buddha really took me into an easiness about it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just,
that's very good.
It felt joyful and soft.
Yeah, that's it. That's that space. And just, we also, what we do is in our yoga and whatever efforts we do, meditation or so, we get so serious. Oh, I have to go into that place of stillness now. Right? And that can't work because there's too much effort there. Now, it's kind of tricky because we have to have the effort of focus. Otherwise, the mind just stays in distraction, right? But once we have the focus, it's about letting go of effort. It's about relaxing. It's about, imagine stillness. What is stillness? You disappear. What is you? You is the one who worries. He's the one who has to do stuff. He's the one who, desires and fears and is confused. That's you. Nothing so great to write home about. But the real you is that laughing Buddha. That is you after you have gone in there and seen that everything you thought it was, wasn't it? And then you come out of that space in that freedom and that love. And you still have this incarnation. And you just have a ball. You don't cling to your neurosis any longer because it gives you somebody to be. You can just be whoever you want to be. And that would be you. Totally at ease. And totally at ease doesn't mean you're always just sitting on a couch smiling. Totally at ease means that you're at ease within yourself with whatever is going on externally. Realized beings are extremely busy people, usually. And, well, what do I know? They can be anything, but the ones that I know have been very effective, very busy, very human. It's like all the colors of human personality are there. But they don't mistake themselves for that. Does that make sense? They know that they're here, they're resting here, their identity is here, their awareness arises from here. And then thoughts are happening and actions are happening and the drama of life continues. But this is immovable. This peace doesn't change. And would you not like to sacrifice your neurosis and your fears and your angers and your desires to that peace? So when we do the fire puja that we do here, this is the fire. And we offer into the fire everything we don't need. It's not really such a great offering. But that's what fire is for. Fire burns up like we don't need. And it frees us. So that fire is your being. Heat it up. Become willing to throw into it all those things that have given you a false idea of who you are. Like your suffering, your desires, your pain. Or hold on to them. It's up to you. In the big scheme of things, it makes no difference. But in your world, it makes a lot of difference. So we're free. We're free to do what we want. And we're free when we are that laughing Buddha. And you can go visit him anytime. He's always there. So when you find yourself that you can't visit him, then look what's going on and you'll see that there's some kind of attachment to something else. And again, it's just like when we talked about the deep, dark secrets, look at the attachment. That's all that needs to happen. You see it, and then it can no longer rule you. But when we can't see that we're clinging to our own pain, then we will cling to that pain until we can see it. And the stillness, where we started here today, the stillness is what allows us to take a look and therefore become free. Stillness is the antidote to that distracted mind. Any questions? Any comments? Do we have anyone online asking something? No? It's quiet out there. And we yearn for love and for peace, or whatever you yearn for, because it's what we are. We don't yearn for something that we have to earn. We yearn for what we already are. So we have to just remove what covers it up. No? No questions? No comments? Okay, I should say, make a little announcement. We will not have our Tuesday satsang next week. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Okay.
This is because we're going now, not weekly, but bi-weekly.
Well, we don't know exactly because then there's this trip in October, so
Yeah,
we just
right.
have to play it by ear right now.
Okay.
So stay tuned, we'll let you know if there's satsang or not. But in at least the next 2 months, it won't be like clockwork every Tuesday. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when it is or not happening. Okay.
Do we want to sing a little
Thank
bit?
you. Namaste. Be well. Love yourself. You already do. Just find that you do.
Do we want to sing a little bit?
Hmm?
Do we want to sing?
I would love for you to sing.
For us.
Are we still online?
Yeah.
Oh, good, great. So you'll get a little kirtan from Durga.
Let's take us here, right?
How are they going to see you?
I don't need them to see me.
But they may want to see you.
No. I just want to sing. Okay. So the mantra is to Saraswati, and it's Om Aim. I always forget.
Saraswati.
Saraswatiye Nama Om. Om Aim Saraswatiye Nama Om. It's very simple too. So just join me whenever you feel ready. One more time. Shanti, Shanti. Shanti. Together again. Om Shanti. 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 One more time. Om Shanti. Shanti. Shanti.